I'm Dana Perino, and this is Perino on Politics. A big week for both campaigns as they make the final push in crucial battleground states. And joining me today is my friend, Ari Fleischer. He is head of Ari Fleischer Communications. He's a former fellow White House press secretary for President George W. Bush. I've known him since my Capitol Hill days. He's done a million things. He's written best-selling books, and he's here today. So welcome to Perino on Politics. This is, Ari, where I call up my smart friends, and I have them brief me on what's going on with politics. So welcome, and thanks for doing it.
Well, I'll try to find some of those smart friends and tell them to go and do your show.
Yes. Well, this is a big deal for me. It's interesting. I was thinking this morning about how to start this off, and I thought it might just be worthwhile for us to maybe take a little trip down memory lane. Just the way that the media has changed so much since you and I first met on Capitol Hill way back when. And even today, you know, I remind people that on my last day at the White House on January 20th, 2009, I didn't have a Twitter account. And even before then, we didn't even have voicemail, really. You know, it was while you were out slips. And so the way people are communicating is changing. And that's changed, I think, how this campaign for the presidency is changing a lot, too.
And technology and all these changes, I think, Dana, have changed the media more than they've changed you or me or anybody who's a practitioner of politics. It made their job a whole lot harder, a whole lot faster, and a whole lot more activist. And there were several things that did that. But when I was press secretary and a big story hit on the front page of the New York Times or the Washington Post, it mattered. Republicans read those papers. There was no alternative. There's no social media outlet.
And also, you would know the night before that story was coming, but you didn't know what was in the paper until you picked it up in the morning.
That's substantially right. Or I had a staffer go pick it up at midnight off of a loading dock somewhere and call me and tell me what was in it. But the point is, the breakdown of the media into these camps where if you're conservative, you only read conservative media or watch conservative media for the most part, and liberal, vice versa, it didn't really exist. We may have thought that those papers, and we were right, were liberal, but we still read them. We were still influenced by them. I can tell you now, Dana, there are campaigns I know, if something hits on the front page of the New York Times and alleges something terrible about their candidate, they don't care. Because no one who's going to vote for their candidate reads the New York Times. So the last bit of influence they really have is that these establishment media are basically memos written to fellow Democratic journalists for here's what you too should cover. So if it's in the New York Times, CBS News, or the Associated Press will chase it. But still, it's not our voters. That's the biggest difference. That's the biggest change. And then the media's become diffuse. And
so let's talk about the current presidential campaign, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. The race has been described to me as tied and getting closer. And it does feel, though, that sort of like the momentum and the fun, it has a taste to me of 2016 as President Trump having fun on the campaign trail, out at McDonald's. He's in all the swing states, having a great time. And the Kamala Harris campaign yesterday, the most that they could muster up was like irritation that he'd gone to McDonald's.
Yeah, you know you're in a bit of trouble when you have to say that you're having joy as opposed to showing you're having joy. Trump never says, I'm having joy. He just has joy. And that McDonald's photo op was one of the most beautiful, best photo ops. I can't wait for Halloween. Everybody's going to be wearing an apron and dressed like Donald Trump. I don't know. Is it 16? You know, I've been studying these polls so carefully and looking at the pace that Trump is on today compared to 20 and compared to 16. But I'm also mindful of in 2022, we Republicans got it really, really wrong, thinking there'd be a red wave. So is it going to be a 16-20 election where the polls underestimated Trump, or a 2022 election where Republicans overestimated themselves? That still is the big unknown. But right now, I'd say this tie game that's getting closer, to put it in baseball terms, this feels to me like we're going into extra innings, but Trump's going to start extra innings with a man on second base, and the Democrats feel like they're going to start extra innings with nobody on base.
You know what I love about you? You use relevant sports metaphors. It's like, it would be weird if you were using like a hockey metaphor right now, since that season just got started. But we now have the World Series set between the Yankees and the Dodgers. I'm calling it, it's not the Subway Series, it's the Coastal Elite Series. But are you a Yankees fan? I think so. Yes.
If there's anything you should have known about
you're
from
Yankees
the White House,
Dolphins.
I'm a Yankees fan.
You're Yankees Dolphins.
Exactly right.
I know that.
Yes. That powerful combination.
Hey, before I ask you more about the campaign, since I have you here and you're a smart friend and I can ask you this, what do you think McDonald's corporate thought about all that?
Well, did you see that they released a letter today, McDonald's corporate?
No, I didn't see it.
It was one of the most gracious letters I've ever read. It really rang true. It just said, basically, we welcome everybody. And it was earnest. It was heartfelt. It wasn't corporate gobbledygook. Whoever helped craft that, kudos to them. And that was their message, that Kamala Harris, Tim Walz, everybody is always welcome. And that's what, there was nothing defensive about it. It was a beautiful letter saying that. Yeah.
Let's contrast that with the statement written by 60 Minutes, which I think was arguably one of the worst ones I've seen. Now, we keep this podcast at 30,000 feet, so let me just give a little bit of background. So 60 Minutes for 2 weeks has been under the gun because it was very clear that they made a substantial edit to one of Kamala Harris's answers on Israel. Now, they have the possibility or the option of putting out a transcript. They have done that before. They are choosing not to do so in this case, even though I think that's weird, because would any of us be surprised if her answer was a meandering kind of a mess of a statement? No, that wouldn't be surprising at all. But she needed help. 60 Minutes helped her. For 2 weeks, 60 Minutes has been under the gun. And then last night they put out a statement that said, well, yeah, sometimes we edit for brevity, but Donald Trump, he declined to come on our show and he's welcome anytime. And I thought, no, I don't think that's going to cut it.
Just in terms of handling this, it's a total mishmash. I mean, this shows why people in the Republican side, at least, think CBS and 60 Minutes are in the tank. And don't forget, they're the same network, the same show, 60 Minutes, that when Mitt Romney ran for president, and there was that dust up at a debate when Romney said that Obama refused to acknowledge the attack on our consulate in Libya was an act of terrorism. Well, 60 Minutes had an interview with Obama where he refused to call it an act of terrorism. They held on to that. They did not release it until the day before the election when it was too late to make a difference. And it was a huge issue because that was the defining moment in the debate between Obama and Romney about whether or not Trump called it. Whether Obama called it terrorism. They sat on it. They put their finger on the partisan scales in that election to help Obama beat Romney, and now they're doing it to help Kamala Harris. They should release the transcript. It's the obvious thing to do. She's
been the nominee for 92 days since the switcheroo, and has never given a press conference. Does that matter?
Yes and no. I mean, the good government side of me says, yes, of course she should hold a news conference. She should show that she's fast on her feet, able to parry questions. It makes her, as you know, Dana, a better potential president, because when you prepare for a press conference, you prepare for every question under the sun. And if there's something you don't know or there's a real split, then you iron it out before the news conference. It helps you to get better. But if I were managing her campaign, I certainly wouldn't tell her to go out and do news conferences. Even with the press that's favorable to her, it's too high risk. You don't want to do it. So politically, probably the right call. Governmentally, I don't know if she's capable of it.
I really loved the jobs that we held. I loved being the deputy press secretary. And then through a series of events, I ended up the press secretary. You were the first of the Bush administration. I was the end. So we were the sandwich. And I just wonder if the job has been diminished, partly because of the diffuseness of the media. But also there's been a change, and I don't know exactly when this happened, but do you remember how the senior wire reporter would call the briefing, right? They'd say, let's start. And then they were the ones that decided when it was over. And that provided a challenge. And I liked that challenge. But now they just close up their book and walk away when they're mad. Like Corinne Jean-Pierre was mad about a question Peter Doocy had the other day. And she got to walk out. And I think if I were reporters there, I think I'd be kind of frustrated.
That briefing room has lost a lot of its value. Mike McCurry and I, former Bill Clinton's press secretary, co-wrote an op-ed when Donald Trump won in 2017. And we said, take the briefing off of TV, take it off of live TV so it's not a TV show. It's something more substantive. It's not as goosed up. It would allow a press secretary to be a little more, I think, reflective. But face it, in this modern era where everything you say is instantly reported into the polarization, the press secretary has to just be such a devout follower and loyalist, tell the line. There is so little actual reflection of anything deep or substantive in that room, and there can't be. I mean, how can you go out there and say, well, I think what the president did, maybe we need to go back and take a look at that. You can't do that if you're the press secretary. You must defend. And that's particularly true in this hyped up era we're in now. So the role of the press in that room, though, has also changed. I'd argue with you when we were there, they were liberal, but that's when the shift started.
I thought they kind of strived to be fair.
They wanted to be fair, Dana, but I guess the bigger point I'm making, you and I talked about this the other day, when Hurricane Katrina hit, that to me was the hinge event that turned the press resolutely against Bush. It made them activists. They just launched. And look at the coverage of Hurricane Helene. The comparison is similar, but they pounded Bush. They will not pound Biden or Harris. They pounded Bush. They could do that to Biden and Harris, but they won't because they're activists.
Do you know that what else happened?
That started it, and then it just accelerated with their love of Barack Obama.
Yeah.
And then their hatred of Donald Trump. And that's what's changed the room more than anything else.
I'm going to add one thing to your Katrina analogy, is that at the same time that Katrina was happening, we were in the middle of the John Roberts confirmation for Supreme Court. And people don't remember that it was getting very contentious because then Katrina happened and then Chief Justice Rehnquist died that Friday night. So then you look at what happened to Alito. And so that swirl of time, I'll never forget it. August 2005 to December 2005 was really something else on that front. But can I ask you one thing? Did Mike McCurry ever tell you about his decision to allow the television cameras in the briefing room?
Yes. And then the first news conference or first briefing he ever held that was covered live was the day the Monica Lewinsky story broke. So that's how they repaid him the favor of letting cameras in the briefing room. This is
like such a great story. You would think that should be in the West Wing or something. All right, we'll have more Perino on politics coming right up. And we're back with Perino on politics. Ari, you were in Pennsylvania campaigning with a friend of ours, Dave McCormick, who's running for Senate. He's the Republican candidate going up against Bob Casey, who's the Senate incumbent. In fact, just today, the Cook Political Report has moved that race from lean D to a toss-up, which means that Dave must be doing something quite remarkable. And I wanted to ask you about the Jewish American vote and how you think that will go this year and why, and will it make a difference?
Key swing vote. And let me also add, if we're talking Pennsylvania, I should disclose, I'm actually working for Dave in this cycle. It's the one and only time I've gone into active duty politics since I left the White House because I'm such a big believer in Dave.
Okay.
But the Jewish vote, 400,000 Jewish voters in Pennsylvania. And typically it's a group that the Democrats will win by 4-1 or 3-1. And I think what's going to happen in this race is they're only going to win it by about 2-1, maybe 65-35, something like that. And this represents, Dana, huge inroads that Republicans are making into a key Democratic constituency. And it's been a long time in the making. George H.W. Bush, our boss's father, when he ran and lost to Bill Clinton in 1992, he got only 11% of the Jewish vote. George W. Bush, when he ran in 2000, he got 19% of the Jewish vote. When he was reelected in 24, he got 24% of the Jewish vote. Trump and Romney each got right around 30% of the Jewish vote, and I think it could be up to about 35 this cycle. Think about this. Republicans have tripled what they got in one generation with a key Democratic constituency. If Republicans could do with what they've done in the Jewish community, in the black community, if they could go from 10% of the vote to 30%, Democrats will forever be locked out of the White House. And this is what's happening in the Jewish community. And it's happening in part because of the crazy Democratic agenda, which so many people have questioned really is not supportive of Israel. And it's been made vivid by what happened in Gaza on October 7th when Hamas attacked Israel. And this foreign policy issue now rises to the forefront of many Jewish concerns. So huge inroads are being made. And these are the swing votes in the suburbs where Republicans need a lot of help.
So that's Pennsylvania. Are there other battleground states where this vote could be decisive?
Yes, I think Michigan is one of those states. Arizona is another one of those states. Nevada is another one of those states. These are states that have swing states that have a sizable Jewish community. Now, it's not, a 10%, 5% Jewish community. It's small. But when you were dealing, as you said at the beginning, with a tied race, it's even closer. These are the key groups. So, when I add it all up, Dana, what I'm looking at is Donald Trump is gaining with Hispanic voters, Black voters, and Jewish voters. Mm-hmm. But I wonder, is he also continuing to lose ground with college-educated suburban women? And at the end of the night, of election night, how will he gain more with these typical Democrat groups or lose more with these typical Republican groups? That still is the key equation that this election day is going to come down to.
The other thing I wanted to ask you before the last segment is when we first met, one of the things, remember the balanced budget amendment? Oh, those were the days. And we all used to talk a lot more about tax policy, and at least Elon Musk is talking about cost cutting in government. And it feels to me like our fiscal situation is so out of whack, but that neither of the candidates really are being honest with the American people about what our condition is and what it means going forward. And gosh, whoever's president in 2028 and 2032, they are going to have their hands full if we don't do something.
Well, yeah, I think you can make the case we already have our hands full when interest payments are higher than defense spending. That's how much we pay just to pay for all this debt we have. Times changed. President Trump's focus is entirely different. He believes that tariffs will bring in money. Economic growth certainly will bring in money. But we don't have enough money to pay for all the debt we're going into. And it's principally because of the entitlements, which nobody wants to touch or even talk about. It's a very different political era, isn't it?
Yeah, it's certainly not talking about. But imagine if President Bush's policy of allowing people the option to take a portion of their Social Security money to put it in the stock market, what it would be worth today.
Dana, when I was there, the stock market was around 7,500. The Dow Jones Industrial Average. Now it's around 40,000. Could you imagine if people just put some money into a private account? It's just what they're doing with their non-Social Security money, and their money has gone up multiple fold. It's one of the ways to be financially successful in America. I wish everybody could have that opportunity.
Yeah, right. Talk about an opportunity economy. Indeed.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, we'll be right back with more Perino on Politics. And we are back with Perino on Politics. Final segment. Ari, this is where I always ask my smart friends, what am I missing? And besides following the Yankees-Dodgers World Series, what are you paying attention to in the last 2 weeks that gives you a clue as to what could happen on election night?
I'm paying attention first and foremost to whether Tua comes back from his concussion and can bring the Dolphins back to the victory. It's an equation. I am paying attention to this equation about whether Trump's gains will be bigger than those losses in those other communities. Because I still am worried, Dana, that the same issue that Donald Trump had in 16 and 20, where he has and Republicans have a serious problem, particularly in the suburbs with college-educated women, is that accelerating? Is it flattened out? Will he gain with those groups? From 16 to 20, he also lost support of white rural voters, in part because he won with such massive margins in 16, it was hard to sustain it to 20. He overwhelmingly won that group in 20, but by less so than in 16. So will that trend continue? Will he lose a little bit of white rural voters, even though he's going to win them overwhelmingly? But in a close election, every one of these shifts of a voting block makes a difference. So on the Trump column, you're going to have Hispanic voters, Black voters, Jewish voters, rural voters. In the Democrat column, you're going to have those former Republican groups of college-educated suburban women and college-educated voters.
Yeah.
Which one will be bigger? That's what I'm looking at on election day. And I'm working on my statistics as we speak. I'm lining it up to the decimal to see where the shifts are, how big a shift, how small a shift, how many people are in that voting block. That's what it'll come down to.
While I have you, then let me ask you one other thing that I was thinking about today on a walk. The Kamala Harris team seems to believe that there are a lot of Liz Cheney thinking Republicans out there. Liz Cheney, friend of ours, of course. Politically, she's gone in a direction that is someplace that I'm not there, right? So, but I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Does the Kamala Harris campaign know something that I don't? That are there a lot of these Republicans out there that could make the difference in an election?
I think the Harris equation here is Liz Cheney equals Nikki Haley. I think they are talking to the Nikki Haley primary voters who did not vote for Donald Trump, some 20% in these primaries, and thinking Liz is the way to reach them and bring them into the Harris camp. So it's not literally about Liz Cheney. It's about more the Nikki Haley voter.
I don't know if that's going to work.
Yeah,
Nikki Haley's endorsed Trump. He hasn't utilized her help that much at all, really. Maybe we'll all look back and we're looking at your statistics and we'll be like, aha, maybe right here it could have helped. Ari Fleischer, thank you so much. We'll let you get back to your busy day.
Thank you, Dana.
Listen ad-free with a Fox News Podcast Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.